Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and today we're going to be looking at something that I think I'm actually just going to really love. This is Super Eye Patch Wolf, why you should watch Outlaw Star. Now, I know this anime because goddamn is Outlaw Star one of those things that I saw when I was just getting into anime and I was just going full neurons engaged on that thing. I just wanted a reason to really see more about it. And if it's Super Eye Patch Wolf, I know he's going to do a really good dive into it, and I'm just really excited about it. So we're going to jump right in. You guys know the deal. There's a link below, original video. Hit it up. It's Super Eye Patch Wolf. You know it's going to be good. I know it's going to be good. Done. Let's start.
In the early 2000s, CNX started airing this late-night block of TV shows. All animations, all weird and dark and adult in a way that I was not used to.
Oh, it must be an Irish thing then because he saw it. Also, yeah, this show was not for little kids, but they showed it on Toonami where I saw it, and god damn, man.
And as a teenager, it was kind of exhilarating.
Wow, you saw this when you were a teenager? How old was I when this came out? I thought he was around the same age as me, so maybe it's newer than I thought? I thought this was late 90s. Huh.
Being a teenager is a time when you can very easily find yourself feeling trapped and isolated. But there was this freedom that came each night with getting lost in these series, and particularly in the freedom of Outlaw Star.
It wasn't like they didn't have cost either.
Framed the wild frontier as this vast, lawless
Space Western
land of opportunity. Outlaw Star shows space.
Was Space Western an entire genre in the 90s and I just missed it? Because I know about this. I know about Outlaw Star. Wait, this is Outlaw Star. Sorry, Cowboy Bebop. Wow, I just got them confused. And I'm sure there's others, but if there's more, I need to go watch them. That would be awesome.
Space in that same way. An infinite cosmic place.
The art just
teeming with danger and reward for anyone.
Oh, I remember this effect. Oh, dude, at the time I was wondering, how did they do that? I'm just like, oh yeah, it's a static picture, and they probably just recorded it with a water effect, either added to it, or they actually put water over it and caused ripples and recorded that, for all I know.
Brave enough to hurl themselves into it, one of whom is
the grappler ship
Starwind.
It's such a Star Wars name.
On the backwater planet of Sentinel-3, Gene's eked out a chaotic living as a work-for-hire bounty hunter with his partner,
basically is almost Star Wars beginning. Huh.
I use the word trapped because while Gene has always dreamed of space travel, there's the mild matter of the horrific childhood trauma caused by a childhood trip into space, resulting in him witnessing the violent death of his father.
Yeah!
Now, even just a glance at space will double Gene over in paralyzing attacks of anxiety in scenes that directly mirror me hitting upload on a YouTube video.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't empathize with that at all. That is definitely not hitting home or anything. Yeah, completely unrelatable.
And so while Gene dreams of space travel, he's trapped, psychologically shackled to this planet. Any hopes of a better life lying cosmically out of reach. But it's here that something amazing happens. Gene never overcomes his anxiety, and we spend the remaining 25 episodes.
I know, it was a weird choice, but they did it.
He stares off into space, wondering what life could have been.
How long is he going to pull this joke out? I'll give it one more second.
That, of course, does not happen. Gene takes a job as a bodyguard from a mysterious woman, and in doing so, becomes entangled with a group of evil space wizards, meets a bio-android named Melfina, who is the key to the galactic ley line, a mysterious entity lying somewhere in the deep reaches of space, with Gene eventually forming a ragtag crew in search of the ley line aboard his ship, the Outlaw Star. And maybe right now you're thinking, hang on, Eye Patch Wolf, did you just say space wizard? And yes, I did. You
know, there's a time where Space Wizard would have sounded weird to me, but I played Destiny long enough when it was good that it doesn't really sound all that odd anymore. How old is this video? 3 years? No, it's not pre-Destiny. Although it is back when Destiny was really still... I don't want to say the word good. That's an overstatement. But it was less shoving in your face. I have no idea what the hell they're doing.
Part of the appeal of Outlaw Star is its brazen disregard in keeping its science...
A man makes a tiny spaceship out of ninja robots. Oh shit, he actually did. I never actually realized that's what they were literally doing, but yeah, he just ninja robot spaceship them.
Fiction in any way grounded. Old men shoot dragons, cats pilot spaceships, there's a mind-controlling cactus, And Jean's main weapon is a caster, a gun that shoots magical spells made by wizards who live on a hot spring planet and play erotic table tennis. And it's dumb, but it's also kind of a blast.
Gonna be completely honest, that last part about the hot spring planet, it was nice fan service for someone who was probably 12 years old. But even then, it really did not fit the tone or the mood for the entire series in the slightest. It was literally, the fan service was the closest thing to an actual plot there. I know what I said. Yeah, that was the one episode you could probably skip, and it doesn't actually hurt anything.
Jean only having a very limited supply of caster shells, meaning there's a real weight whenever one goes off in battle. Their power emphasized by some beautifully creative animation.
Yeah, that was disturbing.
And it's so stupid, but it's so much fun. And that's exactly what I'd say of the space battles. Each ship being equipped with grappler arms, meaning it's now possible for spaceships to engage in karate fights, but also carry space pistols, space nunchucks, and space samurai swords.
I forgot about the sword. It's basically Gundam with a few less steps, actually. And frankly, it's not the dumbest thing I've seen. I mean, it's still stupid, but it's not the dumbest, just because there's a lot of dumb shit out there.
This is a world where one spaceship can punch another in the face, and that's just accepted as something that happens.
Yep.
And what I'm getting at here is the universe of Outlaw Star is wild.
Insane.
You can tell the author Takehiko Ito had a lot of fun in creating the manga the series is based on.
I did not realize this was based on manga. I need to find this. May or may not read it. I just want this. Sorry, I love this style where it's so incredibly well drawn. You have all the speed lines. It's just like a giant, massive endorphin seeing this. Oh
and
my.
While the series is nowhere near as horny as the manga, there's always this feeling of just...
They toned it down for the anime. For someone who doesn't know this show in advance, that probably is like, okay, they probably had to censor it for TV. But this thing did not feel censored. This thing is like, how did they get away with this? In the 90s, early 2000s, they couldn't get away with this on some main stations now. I'm so surprised that they don't show a lot of this show. I mean, not even just getting into the, main characters dying or who you thought were main characters immediately or later or multiple other times. Not as much as you think, but they make it count when it happens and just... And this is not a subtle show in fan service. And apparently this is the toned down version. Sorry, I'm still wrapping my head around that one, and that's probably not the phrase I should use right now. I hope that doesn't come back to bite me in the ass. Or like that one might. I'm just going to shut up.
Just fuck everything and let's make a fun story.
Yep.
And that's really important because the idea of just carving your own path and doing what makes you happy is a big part of Outlaw Star. See, any character in Outlaw Star falls under one of three distinct factions. The Space Federation, who uphold law and order throughout the universe, the Space Pirates, a vast and violent criminal dynasty, and Outlaws, people who don't align themselves with either of the other factions and instead choose to live life their own way, searching out their own freedom. And it's that third group that Jean falls into. He's a person who lives outside the boundaries of the law, danger, or on occasion, human decency. He'll often resort to underhanded tactics in a showdown, which is his main way of surviving opponents more trained and dangerous than he is. And this makes his fights really entertaining to watch, but it also drives home the feeling that this is a dude living life by his own standards and carving out his own path.
Dude, the fights
and it's that path that carries him in his journey across the galaxy that makes up the story of Outlaw Star.
I know I just mentioned, but literally, if you see the fights early on, you think, oh yeah, space wizards. And with the 90s animation style, you got two things. Either you got incredible amounts of animation that put people to near panic attacks when you try and comprehend just exactly how much motion they put in, because it was all hand-drawn. That is an obsessive compulsive dream, and it's amazing, but you almost never got it. Or you got not just speed lines, but only speed lines and static images, so it's tricking your mind into thinking there was motion when there's really not. I'm thinking the old animated Sailor Moon. It is what it is. This thing showed motion back when everything was hand-drawn, and it looked good. And it, like, to the exaggerated actions and stretchy parts to make it feels like everything is in a rubber band, and it gives everything a fluidity. It's just so freaking cool. And when you're first watching it, you don't know that's what you're going to expect. So it has so much impact. It was so freaking good. It holds up today. Granted, it also just looks good in general. I love the art style. I kind of prefer it, but details. But it just looks so good, even without some of the handicaps you can take now to make animation easier, even if it then is less people doing more work to make up for it. So it's still just as hard, if not harder, than before, just for different reasons that are more bullshit. Yeah. That's a completely different topic.
And a big part of what makes that journey feel meaningful is how it takes place in a universe that feels alive with life and culture.
Yeah.
Something Outlaw Star conveys beautifully through its environmental art. Even when showing the deep emptiness of space, Outlaw Star rarely portrays solar systems as infinite star-speckled blackness, but instead as these explosive bursts of color, making them feel like these enticing, intriguing locations. And that same sense of intrigue carries through from the lonely, quiet frontiers of its alien worlds to the neon-drenched streets of its colonized cities.
Yep.
Even
and they did go on
still
neon.
Images, these locations feel so teeming with life and culture. And a big part of that is how Outlaw Star splices its space cowboy aesthetic with this awesome neo-Taoist feel, fusing futuristic sci-fi with old-world Asian mysticism, a culture you can feel right down to the clothing of its incidental characters and even in the combat ability of some of its people. Meaning there's this through line that binds the distinctive worlds of Outlaw Star together, making for a cohesive universe that feels unique and alien. Beautiful. But there's something more to these locations too. There's an atmosphere, one that grounds these characters in these environments.
And I'd say even more than just the atmosphere alone. It's the fact that even is attempted. A lot of times when you see any media, not just Outlaw Star, like what he's talking about now, but a lot of current shows. Okay, full disclosure, I'm an isekai fan. They're simple, cheap, trashy. It's the equivalent of getting a Big Mac. It ain't good food, but it tastes good. That's probably the problem. And yeah, I'm aware of it. But it's just really good shit. And a lot of times, because it just is good enough, modern stories often don't have world building. They either dump everything on you in an exposition dump and it doesn't matter, or you don't have it. There's a lot of good ones that can work it in, build it in. This, though, every vista looks like an incredible world and you see everything built up. And I do wonder if a lot of that is because of the hand-drawn process forced people to put more time into things and they were allowed to do it. Because I know there's a bunch of shit that was, well, shit during this time period. This gave worlds the feeling of having matter, where a lot of things, even now, the plot exists. The story exists for the main character, and outside the main character, you're like, is there anything else to this world? No, there's not. Here, you could set another character in here and watch their story in the exact same world during the exact same events with a completely different story, and it would still be fascinating without changing anything about what's happening in the story itself because there's so much to draw from. It's basically the story of how deep is the lore building around something going, and this does it well, and then there's so many that don't. So many that don't. I brought up isekai because it's easy to get the point across, and it's probably the worst offender. Even when they're good, a lot of them aren't. Jobless Reincarnation being an example of something that does do it well. And what he's talking just is a real triggering point because I was an English major, got the master's in fiction, and I can see that, and while I could ignore it for sheer entertainment, seeing it done well just hammers home whenever it's not done well. And the fact that he's highlighting it is just literally taking that little annoyance button like, hey, remember how most of them press this? You got a bunch of presses saved up you've been ignoring. Now they're all hitting it once. I don't think I'm OCD, but it's definitely hitting me right now.
And what I think that comes down to is how Outlaw Star uses light and shadow to create a sense of space. Which brings us to the exciting world of beginner's color theory.
Oh no. Oh, no. I know this. I hate this. I have absolutely no artistic talent in my body other than to recognize that I should never in any way, shape, or form do this. This is going to hurt me. It's also not wrong.
Click off the video, I love you. The basics of color theory work like this. You can break any color down into 3 values. Its hue, which for lack of a better term is its color, red, green, blue, etc.
Yep.
Tone, which is how bright or dark a color is.
And I'm assuming he's going to show that based on this, it'll also be how you can convey emotion based on how people interpret certain colors to go with mood. Like a blue tone is also a blue mood because we have a synesthesia in our head and how we interpret one thing to mean the other, even though they're not actually connected. And the tone would do that, or I guess the hue would do that considering what's on the screen. It's probably what he's heading for here.
And saturation, which is its purity.
How much color?
High saturation being bold and vivid, low saturation being muted and grey. A lot of beginners artists tend to only think about light and shadow in terms of tone, i.e. bright and dark. And so if they wanted to choose a color for a character's shadow, they might color pick that character's skin and then simply lower the tone to signify shadow.
And that's not bad, but also I think a lot of people aren't actually given the time to do more than that nowadays, so yeah.
This is a very limited way of thinking about color, as you're only using 1/3 of its values and not conveying anything about the effect the light of the environment would have on the character.
To give an idea, he's probably going to get to himself. When he means that, in the previous section he used, let's just go back here. Right here, this point, I hit my mic. Because it's all of a more blue tone, even though he's just sleeping and he's relaxed and completely out of it, you can also tell it's a much more mellow scene because they're using a pale light. It's actually rather bright, even though the tone of the color, even though there's a lot of light here, it looks dark because you have a more bluish light. It's relaxed, it's calm, it's mellow. And because they chose the tone, they can actually up the brightness to get around that, as opposed to just doing what we have over here and just going shadowed. So it's not actually a darker image. Now, they also do a lot of darker images in the show, but it's one of the ways to get it across.
A very limited way of thinking about color, as you're only using 1/3 of its values and not conveying anything about the effect the light of the environment
how much he'll
would
touch on
have
this part.
the character. And so it just looks kind of muddy and dull.
Yep.
A more effective approach is less to think of color as bright and dark and think about it more as warm and cool, to adjust not just the tone, but also the hue and saturation to help convey.
See, it went from, now let's go, right here, where it's like, oh yeah, he's in a shadowed place, where for some reason the light is coming down, but also it kind of comes up a bit, and that's weird. Weird picture. But then over here, because of the emotional impact of having a more red tone, you're thinking, oh, this is a stylized off-brand scene. It does change that impact. And now that I said it, there's probably someone thinking, oh shit, it does look like that. You know who you are.
How a character's environment affects how light and shadow falls on them.
If it was a darker, it'd be more of a bloody scene.
Mixing in more blues with the shadow to give it a colder, lonelier feel. And when you...
And it's not even just the coldness of it, it's literally the synesthesia aspect. I keep coming back to that, but that is the most important part of color is impact. It's how you feel. It's why art has an emotional aspect.
Start to think of light and shadow like this, you start to see how malleable and expressive color can be, how it's possible to give scenes and characters a completely different look and
see, like right here, she's very muted but darker colors. Not just the skin, but actually the like how her shirt itself looks. Everything around her is very grayed out, and even hers is more of a blue tone. Where you see Griffith, and well, I probably shouldn't go to that image now that I think about it, considering YouTube. But not only that, his is very washed out, and well, you get the point considering Griffith. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, would it count as spoilers almost 20 years later? I don't actually know. I'm not going to touch that then.
Feel just by manipulating their color values. And this is something Outlaw Star does really beautifully. It doesn't just use flat color filters, but instead manually readjusts each individual value to give these characters and their environments a totally different feel.
And keep in mind, what he's saying right now is something you can do and just don't think about when you get into video production and do color gradient. I know how to do it to a very limited extent. And even what I know how to do is nothing compared to people who have to do this by hand when these were hand drawn. To the best of my knowledge, this might be computer aided for all I know, but I really doubt it because there's significant amounts of this that do not look CGI. So this is most likely colored in a much more direct process without so many of the tools that make this so much easier now. There's no overall effects you could just swipe on, put on top of something, and be done with it. And it would make such a huge impact to do that. I'm sorry, but the fact that they could do all these types of things, that they put it into just a mass market anime, would be insane in its own right. The fact that they did it well is just crazy. I love it. And it wasn't just like a one-time thing. It was like, oh, here's a dramatic shot. We're going to put it into a shady color. It's all the time to get emotions down in almost every episode when they want to. it really does highlight just how much thought they put into this.
From the seductive lavender light of a late-night hotel room to the calming teal hues of Melfina's tank to the eerie, unknowable golden glow of the galactic ley line, the place...
Oh. Gold. Okay, full disclosure for Year. I literally thought it was a piss light because everyone's kind of getting pissed about going at that. I'm just going to shut up now.
Is lying at the end of the universe. Outlaw Star uses color to ground its characters in their environment, and as a result, there's a genuine sense of atmosphere to these locations. They feel like somewhere you could actually stand, and in a story about the joy of freedom and exploring far-off lands, creating that sense of place is vital in establishing a universe that feels teeming with worlds for you to explore. While there are these little nuggets of lore at the beginning of each episode, Outlaw Star communicates a lot about its universe visually, and you can feel that same visual storytelling in its characters. To me, Outlaw Star is a show at the peak of 90s anime aesthetic, and what I mean by that is since the early 70s, the complexity of character designs in anime had gradually been increasing, to the point that towards the late 80s, you were starting to see more detailed, complicated character designs that walk the line between being believably drawn,
actually had the names on there. Saint Seiya, Mobile Suit Gundam, of course.
Walk the line between being believably drawn, but also hyper stylized. And it's the maturation of that design sense that I really love in 90s anime, and particularly in Outlaw Star. Each character design is drenched in subtle nuance and carved from beautifully distinctive shapes. Take a design like Suzuka's, these soft, elegant shapes of her kimono connecting her to the more refined, old-world culture of Outlaw Star's universe, but that's contrasted against her long, jagged spikes of unkempt hair, giving her a more...
It's not even just the long jagged spikes of hair. It's literally, her entire body is very stretched. Like, if you go back to this image right here, that is a very thin, very long person. If you saw them on the street, it would actually be kind of terrifying because that uncanny valley effect would be right in your face. Normally when you see anime effects, it's like, oh, the giant eyes going... Woo. No, for her, you look at it and it's like, see? Top portion right here, leg. All leg. You can see the swell of the hip right here. The rest is mostly leg. She is 90%, or I guess 70% leg. And she's also on her tiptoes, but that doesn't really change much. And even the neck and the head are very long and stretched. She is very much a person defined by long aesthetics. And it's entirely in how her body shape, how the character shaped, how her robes are long and flowing. Her hair is long and flowing. Her sword is also long and even has a curve. So you can say flowing there. It's so much in there. I'm mostly freaking out because I never noticed this until it was pointed out right now. It's just slapping me in the face.
Against her long, jagged spikes of unkempt hair, giving her a more roguish, confrontational feel. That contrast reflected in her color palette.
Speaking of long, that nose. Very long in how it's shown, which is actually not most of the nose there, but because they're highlighting the upper bridge as well, it makes it look much larger. And considering the rest of the hair, you don't think of that nearly as much. It's not too huge, but compared to everything else being smaller and more intense, it looks huge by comparison.
Mellow hues of her kimono streaked with saturated blood red tones.
Yep.
I feel like I don't need to say anything about Suzuka as a character, and you'll still get a pretty decent idea of who she is.
You'll get to the point.
From her design, and it's designs like this that communicate so beautifully who these people are. From the rigid, oppressive shapes that make up Lord Hazanko, to the rebellious red shock of Jean's hair, to Aisha's wild, untamed bangs. These designs are creative and fun, but they also tell you a lot about these characters before they ever even open their mouths, and only enhancing that feeling is the animation. There's a lot of really nice loose action scenes, but there's also a distinctive quality to how each character moves. Like, compare the cartoonish, energetic animation of Aisha to the elegant, careful movements of Melfina.
Yep.
And what it all means is we come to know these characters just as much through how they look and move as we do through what they do and say. And that's important because a huge part of the appeal of Outlaw Star is its characters.
Yep.
Later on in the story, the crew of the Outlaw Star is rounded out by the vagabond assassin Twilight Suzuka and the Kitaro cat lady Aisha, who I think is just rather good, don't you judge me? And that
No. He makes a valid point. And considering my wife's in the other room, I'm not going to say anything else. But yes, no, he is making a very valid point. She is second best girl. Best one in the tank. I stand by what I said.
It is important that these people are a crew, because as opposed to any one character standing out by themselves, it's the group dynamic they share that really shines. Here you have 5 people whose approach to any given scenario is going to be
punch in the face,
different, creating kind of...
I mean, yeah, but also a lot of them would do some variation of punch in the face. Except for him. He might actually take a different deck.
Of fun tension that leaves them bickering with an endearing familiarity you get with groups of friends who have grown comfortable with each other. Outlaw Star letting us experience this side of the characters by dedicating a lot of time to surprisingly mundane scenes of just these characters relaxing in between missions.
And I think this is the part he mentioned that I loved for this show. It gave you so much feeling in the world because it wasn't just the plot. It was also, here's what's happening when the plot's going on, but they're taking a break to actually be human. Well, mostly human, considering actually I think there's only 3 of the 5, or you know what I mean. But it's that moment of decompression. And I'm just comparing this to so many shows I know now where every scene is for the plot. And that's the basic dynamic between character-based shows and plot-driven shows where the character does one or the other. They're sometimes mixed and matched. This one is very much plot-driven, but has a lot of character to go with it, to the point where it does kind of dip into these scenes, which are very much character scenes. And I think that what made it really good, because it did that well. And it's just highlighting to me how many other shows don't. It's just one thing after the other, and even the downtime is literally just to show how intelligent someone is, because they're planning. I'm thinking of Isekai again, aren't I? Yeah, I am. Again, it's like why Jobless Reincarnation, Mushoku Tensei, is a really good show for when it does this, because it does downtime well. It showed the quiet moments and made them stand out so much that you think that the initial arc of being a kid, little baby, even was 5 or 6 episodes long, when it's 2 to 3. Yeah. He's really hammering home how good this show is and how well other shows don't stand up to it. I really need to get a copy of this thing.
And it's in these moments you really get a feel for who these people are.
Even just her eating with her eyes
like Suzuka telling Melfina not to boil all the flavor out of the rice carry a kind of subtle weight, not only making for these quiet moments of contrast to the insane space battles, but just letting us spend time with these characters and become familiar with them on a more down-to-earth human level. And that's important because a lot of the fun of Outlaw Star is that feeling that you're on this wild adventure with a group of friends, and a lot of that feeling comes from how Outlaw Star uses its episodes. After the first 4-episode arc, Outlaw Star relaxes into a more episodic pace, and it's here we...
Yeah, honestly, I still think that first few episodes are some of the strongest in anime ever, and the rest of it held up, but the first few were just amazing.
You can see the creators having a lot of fun with the scenarios they hurl these characters into. One episode could see the crew joining a crusty deep-sea captain on a voyage to a liquid planet battling giant space crustaceans, the next attempting to infiltrate a women's wrestling tournament where one of the contestants is a secret werewolf. Hang on, Eyepatch Wolf. Stop interrupting the video! Other episodes are more
I refuse.
And lets us see the subtler side of these characters, like watching Jim make friends with Mysterious Girl on a space station before the two are forced to go their separate ways forever, in a bittersweet little story that reminds you, despite everything, Jim's still just a kid. And it's moments like these, when Outlaw Star uses its episode to build these characters and their relationships, that the show is at its strongest, and can occasionally hit surprisingly hard. Like, let's talk about episode 15, The Seven Emerge. Up until episode 15, Outlaw Star's been this fun romp. Gene and his crew for...
I actually know the exact moment they're talking about. I haven't seen this episode. I haven't seen this show in closer to 20 years than not. Holy shit. But I know what he's about to talk about, and this is where that initial action from the first arc, from the first 4 episodes, and then the downtime swings into high gear, where they're saying, oh yeah, by the way, we're still here. The plot's still going on. There've been little bits and pieces here, but we're going to now hit you in a high gear and get to the rest of it. And this is just the beginning. I know exactly what he's talking
For the
about.
most part, overcoming handily every obstacle that's put in their way. But that all comes to a crashing halt when early one morning, Jean is met by a lone gunman claiming to be a member of the On-10-7, a group of deadly space pirate assassins also pursuing the galactic ley line. But when Jean tries to preemptively take out his opponent, he realizes that for the first time, this is an enemy he cannot beat. The gunman telling Jean that they will duel at noon tomorrow, and that Jean has just 24 hours to make peace with the fact that he's about to die. For a show that can be as zany as Outlaw Star, this episode does a surprisingly good job of framing Jean as this young guy coming to terms with his mortality for the first time.
Yeah, this episode scared the shit out of me as a kid. Like, it wasn't even just the thought of the character dying. It was them confronting it, and this moment right here, just that sheer, oh, fuck moment. It was just the thought that these characters are dying, not just as a character dying, but there are people grappling with it. It's that moment that transfers from being fun to actually having weight. Even though nothing that happened so far was all that crazy, you could easily think of ways to get out of it. I would just assume cheating and bombs. But it's such a good moment because it highlights the weight of a decision and someone thinking that they don't have a way out. That sheer pressure of the entire situation pounding down and crushing them. It is stress incarnate, and it stood out to me as something absolutely batshit terrifying as a kid, and I loved it and hated it in equal measure.
And he slips into this lethargic depression, drowning his fears in a dingy back alley
I hated
bar.
this episode, but it
here
stood out
he meets
so
an
much.
old man who tells Jean that the one to invariably survive duels is often the person that life means the most to. That night, Jean is plagued by visions of his own death, but when Melfina tries to comfort him, Jean drunkenly grabs at her, and she pulls away, devastated and crying, and it's such an uncomfortable scene, echoing our capacity to hurt the people closest to us when we're at our lowest. Jean arrives the next morning at the duel, and despite being shot, manages to kill the gunman, and for a moment it's all over, before realizing that the real On-10 assassin is actually the old man from the bar. And now Jean, wounded and facing an opponent of much greater skill and experience, pulls out every trick in his arsenal, but nothing works. And as the fight goes on, Jean is viciously beaten and broken, to the point that his crewmates can't stand to just watch anymore and intervene, desperately fighting to protect their friend. But just like Jean, each one struggles against the deadly assassin. And it's a sad and desperate fight, and one by one, each member of the Outlaw Star falls, until it's just Jean and the assassin left. And in a stroke of fate, the old man's gun misfires and Jean lands a lucky kill shot. Afterwards, the crew of the Outlaw Star gather together, and there's this feeling that they barely survived this encounter, but they did through each other. That this journey is more vast and dangerous than any of them could have imagined.
In video game terms, this was literally the end game boss who they weren't supposed to fight yet, and he just let them win. Not that he let them win, but the game itself. Because goddamn, was this not fair.
But together, they can survive. This is the heart of Outlaw Star.
Yeah, honestly though, I saw this before I was a teenager. I'm not sure if I was just younger, or maybe I just didn't realize how old I was. That's a weird thing to say, but considering how often I forget my own age, that is entirely possible I might have. Huh. But yeah, it just, one, being a teenager sucks. Anyone who enjoys it, you should be very afraid of. Run. They are not healthy. They will do horrible, horrible things, like go into accounting. Oh. Sorry, there are lines I shouldn't cross. I crossed one there. I apologize.
After Outlaw Star,
they really came out that close together? Holy shit. It does kind of make sense. Outlaw Star is the growing up story that is more adult, where Outlaw Star... Well, that's Outlaw Star. Sorry, Cowboy Bebop. I keep getting the names confused. Cowboy Bebop is more about already being the adult and having it wind down. It's literally the wind up and the wind down and how their tones are treating everything. Hell, it you can almost say they kind of work together when viewed in that order together. Not related, not sequels or anything or spiritual successors, just they kind of have that exact opposite tone of winding up versus winding down. Huh.
Also about a ragtag collection
that.
of people exploring a Western-inspired sci-fi universe aboard a spaceship,
But they are
one that
diametrically
would go on
different
to
in how they go.
redefine what anime television could be. And I think in a way, Outlaw Star has always lived in the shadow of Bebop, and I can understand that. While I could feel myself growing out of Outlaw Star, I could feel myself growing into Cowboy Bebop. I watched myself become these characters, gradually encumbered by the weight of life, collecting scars, and moving on regardless. To the point that 2 years ago, I actually tried to write this very video, but I couldn't. When I returned to Outlaw Star, that same sense of freedom and adventure that had meant so much to me, the connection just wasn't there anymore. I was different, and I moved on.
Oh?
So, why? Why go back to this show now in a video format I've mostly left behind?
I think for a lot of the reasons you just mentioned, it is technically quite well done. The story has a lot of impact, and if I'm going to take a wild guess at what he's going to throw out there, because it does remind you of what you initially valued when you did feel that pressure, like those scenes that really freaked me out. I keep talking about this, and I haven't gone back to the show, where I have gone back to Outlaw Star as well. I keep saying the names wrong. I meant Cowboy Bebop. Fuck it. Me getting names wrong. That never happens. Wow. I'm assuming that's where he's going with it. Or he'll recommend it to people who are growing up. Because it's a good show that does treat it more, well, realistically, as crazy as I could say this about a space western about space wizards. But by comparison to a lot of the other things that are growing up stories, this is better and it feels more true. And isn't that something you can really use as a damning sentence for a lot of other stories?
And well, at the time of writing this, I'm currently in my 6th week of quarantine. I spend my days entering and exiting the same 3 set of rooms.
3 years ago, yeah, that would be right at the beginning of 2020, and he's feeling trapped, so having a story about being trapped and getting out of it would fit, yeah. That makes way too much sense. It's a good thing I'm not blocking out any of those memories, mostly because pre- and post-pandemic literally didn't change how I did anything. Yeah, I am a nerd. I basically think, ooh, great, it's my day off. I get to stay inside and play video games and record, but also play video games. That's my life. I'm okay with that. That was a giant ring light. Wow.
And I can't see my friends or my parents or do anything. And it fucking sucks. If I was to put a word to it, I'd say I just feel trapped.
Mm-hmm.
But it was that feeling that had me going through a lot of the old shows that I used to love. And when I got to Outlaw Star, something kind of cool happened. That feeling of freedom.
So it's literally the exact same thing as growing out from a song that you've heard 1,000 times to the point where you know the emotional impact and it loses that weight. Walking away and then hearing it again, maybe 20 years. I keep going 20 years considering how long that's actually been since I last watched this anime. 20 years later, and it has that emotional weight again because you're in a situation where it applies. Because he's now watching this show in a situation where it applies. So it has the same impact as when he first saw it because the situation has changed where it fits his mood again. Huh.
Freedom at the heart of Outlaw Star, it started to mean something again. Every night I'd sit down and watch an episode, and it was 22 minutes that the walls of this apartment just melted away. And I felt free. And I think there's something really cool about that. The idea that the kind of escapism we crave changes with when, where, and what we are. And the way things are, I just really needed a story that felt like me and my friends blasting across an infinite, stupid, and beautiful universe. I get the feeling a lot of people could probably use that right now. And that's why you should watch Outlaw Star.
And that was honestly a really good indication why I'm probably going to go and binge watch that after I stream later today, because I've missed this show. And even though my reason to rewatch it won't be the same as his, I don't feel trapped, mostly because I'm a nerd. Sitting inside, not doing anything is literally my state of being in general. I just appreciate so many of the things. It's not going to be so much this show resonates with me. It's more, this show is like the old friends you haven't seen in a long time, and it's just that nice reunion moment. And I want that because it just sounds great. And also because I literally haven't seen it in 20 years. Holy shit. I know, I'm stuck on that. It just feels weird. But yeah, I'm going to go do that because it sounds great. And I get where he's getting this. I wish he had gone a little more into the color aspect. Wow, considering how much I hate color theory, I'm actually wishing he talked more about that. I don't have any explanation. I'm weird. Let's just chop it up to that one. But there's a lot of aspects about how the color and the emotions of the scene, not just how it impacts how they look, but how you feel in it, how it gives you an extra bit of visual clue to what's going on, to the emotional state of a character without saying a word. And it worked, and I just love this. Basically what I'm saying is, I'm going to go watch it. If you can, do it. If you can't, sorry, that would suck. If you haven't seen it yet, hopefully we didn't spoil too much, but it's a really fun ride. And even with what you know right now, even with some of the spoilers I may or may not have mentioned, it's a good show worth watching because it's unique and it's well done. And if even just for the quality alone, I'd recommend it. Now, if you don't mind, I would actually appreciate if anyone knew what I should check out next from Super Eye Patch Wolf, because I'm just randomly picking things here, and so far it's actually worked out pretty well. A lot of people want to see the wrestling stuff. I might do that. Don't know. We'll find out what happens. Probably at the same time I find out what happens. Yeah. I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.